Thank you guys for joining us. Just really appreciate it. Whether you're at home or at church, in the sanctuary, just really grateful for this time where we can come together as a community, maybe out of state, maybe just in Park City, but for all of us just to turn our hearts, our eyes to God, especially during these times. 2020, it's been a heck of a year. It's almost like every day there's too many headlines to read. And I just kind of found myself in this place of just having to be selective, about what I'm listening to. And I don't want to be selective in staying in a bubble, but it's just, I don't know if you guys feel like this, but it's just everybody has something to say about what's going on, and opinions are so strong. And so I've just been kind of selective in choosing, but trying to take in, what's going on. And as a church, I don't want to be silent, with the issues going on. And the heat's just cranking up as we get closer to election and things. And just as a church, as followers of Jesus, there is a way for us to walk. And here at Creekside, that's our goal, is to put into practice and live out Jesus' teachings. So today we're just going to be diving into a story in John. We've been going through John as a church. And if you want to get your Bibles, have them ready. John chapter 7, starting in verse 1 is where we're going to be. And I just want to go ahead and dive right in. So John chapter 7, we're just going to read about 8 or 9 verses. John 7, verse 1. It says, "After this, Jesus went around in Galilee. He did not want to go about in Judea because the Jewish leaders there were looking for a way to kill him." Those are some intense times now for Jesus. Verse 2, "But when the Jewish festival of tabernacles was near, Jesus' brothers said to him, 'Hey, leave Galilee and go to Judea, so that your disciples there may see the works you do. No one who wants to become a public figure acts in secret.'" So now Jesus is getting advice, and people in his own household have pretty strong opinions of how he should act. And they continue, since you are doing these things, show yourself to the world." Right? And it kind of makes sense, right? Because people need to hear from Jesus. They need to see Jesus. These are Jesus' bros, like his blood brothers. We learn in Matthew 13, there's 4 of them. I think, let me see, James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas. It's not Judas Iscariot. So he has 4 brothers, blood brothers, in that household. And right now they're doubting him. Well, let's just keep going. Verse 5, "For even his own brothers did not believe him." Verse 6, "Therefore Jesus told them, 'My time's not yet here. For you, any time will do.'" If that's really the mission, is to go be famous. Any time will do. "The world cannot hate you, but it hates me, because I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I'm not going up to the festival, because my time has not yet fully come." After he had said this, he stayed in Galilee. Let's just pray together just as we start to dive in. God, thank you for this story. Thank you for your accessibility, that we can reach out to you and that we can hear from you. And you're the source of love. You're the source of life. You're the source of all of us, every nation and tongue. And just as we dive into these things, we just ask that you would speak in the way that only you can do in our hearts to each of us individually and as a community. And so we just ask your Holy Spirit to move on us through this message. Slow me down, that my heart could just be fastened to you and moving at your pace. And especially in these times that everything seems to be speeding up, we just slow down in your presence right now to hear from you. And it might not be the most entertaining, but this is the way we build a life that lasts. And so we sit in your presence and just look to hear from you today. In Jesus' name, amen. So, me and Joe, my wife, we've been watching some sports movies and just kind of eating them up lately. She's probably sick of them by now. But with these sports movies, I love them because everybody knows the big names of the athletes, but we don't know their story, and we don't really know what motivates them. And there's a lot of headlines about these guys, and there's a lot of assumptions that we know why they're doing what they're doing. But when we see these stories, it's always amazing, to pull back the curtain and see what's truly motivating these guys. And I think Joe was just telling me, she's like, it's really cool watching these sports movies. And I was so stoked that she liked it because I want to watch them, and so I'm hoping she likes it. And she's like, yeah, it just really, it shows me that, these motivations are so complex. You can't just write off, oh, this guy just wanted to be the greatest for money or fame. That's like very rarely the story. Usually what we're seeing is like these amazing desires in these dudes. And we've totally written them off as shallow. They just want fame. They just want to be the greatest for their ego. But when you dive in their story, we see their hearts. And we see that there's something deeply powerful about they're doing it for their community. They're doing it to change the circumstances of their neighborhood they grew up in. They're doing it to bring something to a city for people to rally around that breaks down walls and divisions and race. And, we can have unity over these things like the music and the sports. And so we start, it's just so cool when you start to realize, you're like, wow, I didn't quite know that story. And then it starts to really change how we view their life and how we make, choices in our life and what we do. And that brings me to this place where, just like in this story we just read with Jesus, there's a lot of strong opinions about what he should be doing because he's the Messiah. Even guys in his own household, his own brothers, they're essentially calling him out. And dudes, this week has been the week of getting called out. If you're watching social media and the news, it's just calling out after calling out this dude, calling out that dude. And, we see the headlines of these very public figures getting called out and very strong opinions, and it's just hard. But the thing that hit me while I'm looking at this is, just because we have close proximity to an issue doesn't mean we understand the issue. And, just because Jesus' bros lived in his house doesn't mean they understood his mission. They didn't get it. And I can say that so confidently because you know what their perception of Jesus' mission was? It says it right here in verse 4. To become a public figure. No one who wants to become a public figure does anything in secret. And they totally missed the mission. And it's in their very own house. It's their own brother. And it just really, it hit me that wow, just because I'm rubbing shoulders with my wife every day doesn't mean I'm understanding her. Or we can talk to our family every week, but doesn't mean we're understanding them. And then the scary thing is when you think you understand something, and then all the emotions come with it, and then you put an action plan down that is totally not the right action plan. And I learned this firsthand. Speaking of bad action plans, when I first became a missionary, and moved to a village in the South Pacific in Fiji, I had a heavy action plan when I got there because there was a lot of stimulation going on. Have you guys seen those commercials of when you see a third world village on TV, and if somebody walks out of a little shack with holes in the walls and no windows, what's the look on their face? We've seen it, we've seen these organizations, and for some reason, I just assumed that these kids don't have a proper house, so they're going to be sad, So anyways, I show up to Fiji. This is back in 2013, and that hit me hard because visually you just see that these people don't have much. They don't have clothes, they don't have a house, they don't have, the same medicine, they don't have electricity, and it just rocked me. Even though I was getting ready for it, it rocked me, and I showed up, and I just start calling my dad. I start calling people back home. All right, you guys, we got to do something about this. These kids don't have stuff, These families don't have stuff, and they don't have, food. I walk in a house, and there's no food anywhere because they don't store it like that. But to me, I was just like, dude, they got no food, and I was in a panic, and so I'm just like, all right, let's get all the money we can get. And let's just start throwing down on stuff. And how do we get stuff here? How do we get clothes here? How do we get more food here? And we started doing all this action. And it sounds like it was great action, and it made great photos. But I really hit a discouraging place where I started to see all that effort. It wasn't actually helping. And I'm just trying to be honest from my own experience. We can be so sure on how to help one moment, but after some time, our strategy is going to totally change once we see the reality. And I wish so badly that someone gave me this advice. If I could go back to 25-year-old Seth, 2013, getting on the plane to go to Fiji. Honestly, if I could give one piece of advice to Seth, I would have said, all right, dude, for 1 year, no action. You can't start organizing stuff. Just live with them. Just be there. And that would have put me in a whole new place because I came in ready to save the day. That's kind of the story that we tell ourselves, that we got to go over to these countries and save the day because they're bummed. And here's the realities that were coming out to me was I saw these kids come out of their homes with no windows and holes in the walls, and they were full of joy. And, I thought man, they don't have stuff, so everybody's going to be really stingy and, they're not going to be sharing. But the reality was they were the most generous people in this village that it rocked me. Nobody held on to mine. When nobody ate alone, nobody held on to their portion of fish. If whoever was even walking by, even if it was somebody from way the other side, they would always, and I'm not exaggerating, it literally is always, say, come inside, I have some food right here. And they were the most generous people. They were the most, they were just so full of joy, and they were so connected to the land. And what I started to realize as I came to the rescue, right, in 2013, and the reality was when I started living there, they started to rescue me, and they started to teach me. And this is the unraveling. This is the spiritual growth. When we can start to sink into someone's story and actually see what's going on past the TV screen, past our way of framing it. And it rocked me. And I'll never forget the day, one Fijian guy, he came up to me, and he was like, they call me Sethi. So he's like, hey, Sethi. He's like, why are you here? And it just stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, I don't know. I don't have a mission anymore. How can I call myself a missionary if I don't even have a mission? You know, like, these people are worshiping. These people are dancing. They're praying. You know, they're teaching me, and I'm the missionary. And so he's like, why are you here? And I just sat there, and I could have thought of a lot of things to say back, but only one thing came out of my mouth. And man, what I said was, because your life is beautiful. And the guy, he literally, I think it was the first time he ever heard anybody say that to him. That his life, that his land, that his people were beautiful. And I didn't know what to do at that moment, because all of my framework was unraveling. All of my purpose was unraveling. My ego was gone. Like, there's no ego in being, you know, I was the one. I was the one being taught by this third world developing native people, you know, and after all of the media and all the stories we've heard, I started to realize there's a lot of holes here. There's a lot of unheard things going on in the world. There's a lot of joy here. There's a lot of peace. And so all that to say, I think this was a couple years into our ministry. And I started to see, and I started to understand what we could do. And so it was coming Christmas time, and we made a plan. And I had so much peace about it. But if I tell you this plan, you're going to laugh at me, because this sounds like the most trite, shallow project we could do in a third world. But I'm not joking with you. This is what I did. We literally raised a bunch of money. We hired a bus to come to the village, a big yellow bus to come from town, to pick up, because every Christmas we do a single moms project. We call it our Fiji Moms, and we just do something to honor them and to help, you know, their needs, physical or just however we can come alongside them. So this time, and I told the whole village, a bus is coming, but it's only for the single moms, or the women, the widows, the grandmas, you know, the teenage moms, you know. So all the dudes, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, you know, but this is specifically for them, okay? So they were cool. They were like, oh, nice. Seth's taking all the ladies on a field trip. You know? And it was just this funny joke. But we piled them on a bus. We took them to town. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to take them to their very first movie. Some of them, it was the very first time they went into town, treated like this, treated special, to go to a movie. And immediately, you know, the ladies, they're coming out of their houses. They're coming out of their little, you know, huts, just looking beautiful. Their hair's done. They're feeling like, we're going to town. We're going to a movie. You know, and you could just see, like, I couldn't describe it at the time, but what it was this dignity, and was this, you know, they felt loved, you know. They felt worthy of, you know, just, I don't know how to describe it, but they pile on the bus, and I took them, and this is the part where you guys are going to laugh at me. And, you know, whatever, but like, I wanted to take them to go see Moana, a Disney movie. A Disney, you know, we raised a pretty good amount of money to do this, to take them to Moana in animation, because Moana was a story of a woman saving her village. And I wanted to show the people how beautiful their lives are to us. I wanted them to see that the biggest movie industry, Disney, you know, put millions of dollars to make this, to show your life. And we went there and we watched it, and it was amazing. I don't know if you guys seen it, but the animation's insane, because the water and the cultural customs, and all the old ladies knew it. They're scrubbing the coconuts like that. That's how they do their laundry. That's how they cook the pig. You know, the chickens running around. That was totally their life. And we're sitting there watching this, and I'm looking around at the ladies, and they all just have the biggest smile on their face, because they're seeing that we think their lives are beautiful, that we would create something that puts them in that place. And for so many of these ladies, they had never thought about themselves in that way. They thought they were at the bottom. They were less than. They were, the outcasts of the world, and they needed to get to America to live like us. And all of a sudden, this movie flipped the script. And this really got me, we had all kinds of responses. Not everybody understood what we were doing, but in my heart, I knew this is what God wants me to do here, is to bring dignity. It's not for me to come in as the white superhero, but for me to come in and help them believe that God has a purpose for them, that God intentionally and cherishes and loves their voice and their colors and their language. And it was flipping me all upside down, because I wasn't being a missionary. I was taking a bunch of ladies to a movie, But this is my challenge. This is my challenge to us, is if we can have the humility to let go of our strategy plans for a second and ask the question, do I even understand my story? Because we're rehearsing a story of us, our people, America, what I deserve, who I am, what I'm entitled to. We're rehearsing that subconsciously every day. And if the story's off, our whole lives are going to be off. And this might not sound super Christian either, but another revelation of this came to me when my pops, a couple years back, we had this experience, and it was one of the most. It was a life-changing experience for me, and it wasn't at a church. You know where it was? It was at a concert, at a U2 concert in Minneapolis, ironically, and at U.S. Bank Stadium. And my dad took me to go see U2, and they were doing their Joshua tour. Joshua Tree tour. And I was stoked because I've always heard about Bono and the shows he does, but I'd never been at one. And we actually had tickets like on the front row. Like I don't think we were the very front, but we were like the front. Like the stage was right here. And it was in US Bank Stadium. That place can pack in 80,000 people. It's like brand new, huge stadium, beautiful. So we walk in this place. We walk down on the field of the Vikings where the stage was, and we're down on the field. And there's like 60,000 people behind us. And then the whole football field's flooded. And it was so weird because I'm sitting there and I'm like looking at this stage, and it looked like the simplicity and the minimalism of my wife's closet and my mother-in-law's house. They're so clean they don't need much. But this stage had nothing. And I was so shocked. I was like, how are they going to entertain 60,000 people? And this is an empty stage, because I've been to shows, and you got to get the lights, and you got to get the huge speakers, you got to have everything. Literally, the only thing on the stage was a drum set. And it's just sitting there. And we're just kind of sitting there looking at all the people coming in. And it was like starting to kind of freak me out. Like, oh man, like this is going to be a boring show. Like people way up in the rafters aren't going to look down at just a naked drum set. It's just like, so anyways, we're chilling there and waiting. And then all of a sudden, you hear just like one note of the guitar, but it was like so crispy and loud and awesome that it just grabbed everybody's attention. And then all of a sudden, Edge walks out, just ding, 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 just strumming his guitar. And the second he walked on the stage, everybody just like, wow. And Ed just walks out, and he has no microphone. It's like hooked up right here. He has no cords. He's totally free to walk around. He's just walking around the stage, and he's not even saying anything. He's just like looking at 60,000 people strumming his guitar. And then, what's the drummer's name? I can't remember. It's not good. Adam Clayton. Then the drummer comes out and just adds to that. Ding, 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 ding. Is that? I hope it is. Okay. But anyways, the drum comes out, and they start dropping the beat on top of it. And then, it's still nothing on the stage. It's just two musicians. And then Bono comes out. And when he comes out, it's just the decibels in that arena. It feels like the roof is going to lift off. It's just, wah! And Bono comes out and like waves, and then he just starts singing. And when he started singing, this was so crazy because it's the stage has nothing on it. It's just, and the backdrop of the stage is just it's just a big black wall. It just looked like a black wall. And right when he started singing on the screen, that black wall turned into the biggest HD screen I've ever seen in my life. And we were all of a sudden transported to driving down the highway like in Joshua Tree, just cruising down the highway, and this huge display like out of nowhere, and Bono starts singing Where the Streets Have No Name. And and at that moment, and like me and my dad, we started crying because my life growing up, we would cruise down the desert highways, bumping Joshua Tree, this same song with the same scenery, except now Bono's standing right in front of us, singing it back to us. And it was just one of those moments where it was just too much revelation. He was like, what? And it just, this explosion. And they did such an amazing job. And like the whole point of that concert was you're cruising down the highway in America, and you're looking at hitchhikers on the street, and they're just like this, and your car kind of goes by them, and it's kind of slow-mo as they're jamming, but you keep jamming, you start to see another figure on the side of the road, and as you get closer to them, you kind of see, and they're like wearing different kinds of clothes, different kinds of people, and they're just like hitchhiking, or just waving. And throughout the concert, you get to hear the story of immigrants, and it was actually the story of immigrants who are Americans. And this may make me sound like so ignorant and naive, but like I never thought of myself as an immigrant until that concert, because I always started the story of my life in America. This is where we started. This is where my people came from. But the light bulb went off that there's a whole story before that. And I was, and I've been told like, yeah, my grandma came over from Sweden, and I started thinking about that, and it just hit me, and I was like, I have our origin story totally off. And it was kind of scary because, I don't know, it's kind of scary to feel like I don't know who I am, that feeling. I don't know who I am. I don't know my roots. It was an illusion, and I'm American, but just facts is just look at the chapter before the American chapter, and our bloodline's still there. My family is still there, but they were in Sweden. And that was it was a humbling concert because I started looking around differently at all these 60,000 people. And when we came to the concert, I was like, yeah, Minnesotans, they're boring, just whatever. They're nice, I love Minnesotans, but, I'm not going to try to talk to them like here. But after that, I was looking at people like, whoa, what's his story? Where's he from? What did his grandparents go through? Whoa, this guy. And it was overwhelming for me to have this humbling and to have this revelation that like there is way more to this than me, standing in my land. Because, the next logical conclusion, I started to feel like what I felt like in Fiji. And in Fiji, I was the only white guy. I lived with natives, of Fiji for 5-6 years. And like I'm a visitor. And I started to have a new mindset here, like, whoa, like this isn't my land. I'm just, this is just a blessing for me to be here. And it started to totally change, everything. Because I assumed I knew my origin story, and I totally I'm from Utah. We're in Park City. We're pretty isolated from, a lot of different cultures in America. But like after living in Fiji and just getting a taste of stepping outside of my own shoes and seeing that, it became really liberating for me to do that. And so I love listening to music. I love listening to art and movies, from other people's perspectives, because it's always like, it brings an amazing liberation for everybody. And I just want to connect this a little further. And you guys remember the Black Panther Marvel movie, and a lot of us were just like, yeah, it's a sweet action hero movie. That's a sweet Marvel movie. But actually, it wasn't. Like, not that actually, that sounds like I don't think it was awesome. This is what it is. I'm just going to show you. I'm just going to hold this up to the screen. Oh, yeah. They can see that. It says, "A hero rises. The revolutionary power of Black Panther." Time magazine. And I don't see any other Marvel movies with that statement. And like this movie, it wasn't just an action movie. It was a story that reached back. And I'm ignorant to these things, but there's something inside of me that just resonated so strong that, when I started watching this, I started seeing these people, and it's reflecting the African American people, and it's telling their story, and it doesn't start in slavery. That's not the origin, and I think it hit me so strong because like just living with the misconceptions of my Fijian brothers and sisters that I lived with, I came with misconceptions that they start in poverty and sadness, but that's not their story. Their story is beauty and land and tradition and culture. They have an origin story that I had no idea about, and this is what Black Panther did. It showed that the African American people don't come from slavery. That was just a chapter in their story. And actually, they come from a land, and this is where the movie was just awesome. They pulled from real life cultural stuff, like with the clothing and with the language sounds, and it was just so fun to watch, and the beauty of this land. And it did not look like Africa that we see on a commercial for a nonprofit. It was like what's the word? Thriving and alive and beautiful, and their technological advances, their wisdom of life, and it just resonated with me like so much with just the Fijian people. Like, yeah, they might not have what I thought they needed, but like these kids in Fiji could speak 3 languages. They knew how to sit and make everything they needed. They could, a 5-year-old kid could survive making his food. They knew how to sit in the presence of death. They knew how to mourn. They knew how to cry with the community. They knew how to be present with life. They knew how to tell stories in 3 languages. And I started to see dude, these people are so much more advanced than me. And that's just what was resonating in me as I watched this movie. And it exploded in the box office. It exploded on social media. There was this whole thing, what Black Panther means to me, and just a hashtag, and people were just boom, 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 boom. Like, this movie changed my life. This movie is showing me that I'm not a less than, that I'm not trapped, that I'm not a prisoner, I'm not a slave, that I can be this. And just seeing a king, seeing a young black teenage girl in a laboratory as a scientist. This one girl was commenting, she's like, I got inspired to be a scientist because I saw that, whoa, there's a black teenager who's thriving as a scientist. If she can do it, I can do it. And it was literally, we take this for granted because I think as white America, we see it all the time. We're represented in all these different ways. And honestly, I didn't realize how unrepresented all the facets of life are for minorities here. And, this week, I don't want to be a church that is, just totally consumed with politics. But at the same time, it's like I can't really separate it right now, and we can't just sit, and these are revelations, and I'm hearing, stories and backgrounds that I had no idea this suffering was going on. And so anyways, all this to say, with the U2 concert, with the Black Panther movie, it started this question in me of, let me just find my place here real quick. It started this question in me is, it's not really a question. I guess it's more of like a revelation, but I'm not being told the whole story. I grew up in the education system. I grew up in Utah, and I do not know the whole story of us, of you, of, especially right now, the suffering and the hurting of this community that is, it's coming to, it's being heard right now, and I want to be a part of that because I have a passion. I can't receive all the blessings of being with a native people in those discoveries and separate and not hurt with it, and somehow it's all blending up for me. And like my question is just the history. Can we be humble, and can we revisit our history? Can we revisit our entitlements? Can we revisit what it means for a person to have black skin? Because it doesn't mean poor. It doesn't mean fear. It doesn't mean those things that you just suck it up from the culture. And this is an amazing time in history when I feel like we're moving forward. With even how ugly or hard and painful, and right now it's not, somehow we are hearing it, even though it's hard. And I feel hopeful in this because I see, once you hear the story, what happened to me, as soon as I heard, you can't go back. It's impossible to go back to your old world. And we're moving forward together. So I think I just want to kind of, all that stuff, just to kind of tee up my last point, my last thought is to take this a little bit further to a spiritual sense. And I hear it all the time. When you hear somebody tell our origin story in the gospel. I was listening to some podcasts this week, and I always heard, and I've always been told, and I went to Bible school, all this, I've always been told, all right, you want to know where we come from and who we are? Here's the origin story. We got to tell you the bad news first, so then we can tell you the good news. And this is kind of the pattern. I'm sure you guys have heard it. So the bad news is that, this is where it started, and all this mess and in sin and brokenness. So you just got to face the facts that, you are sinful, you're messed up, you're broken. And that's the starting place. And then it goes on to talk about Jesus. I like in Bible school is just such a common word. Your good deeds are filthy rags. This is the beginning of our story. We have nothing good in us to offer God because of grace, right? So, we have nothing good in us. And it's just, that's solidified so strong. In Jeremiah 17:9, it says, even their good deeds are filthy rags. And we can get real bold on this point and just shout it to the sanctuary and say, even your good deeds, it's all about this. Even your good deeds, and but I have to stop for a second and, and ask the question, really? God is disgusted at me having kindness for a stranger? That's a filthy rag? And it just didn't sit well. I'm like, you're telling me all my deeds are filthy rags, and I don't want to have an ego trip and try to seem like I'm all good. But really, God is disgusted by, an offense coming at me and me letting it go and doing everything in my strength to show compassion back and to try to listen and try to ask, try to get real. God thinks that's disgusting. Like us helping, us serving, us studying, us praying is disgusting. And I started to get into the context of this verse, and I think we have taken this small moment, this small part of the story, and we shout it to all of us. And I'm just going to because it's all about context, right? And in the context of this story, the people of God are fasting. They're having spiritual gatherings. They're having festivals. They're fasting. How more spiritual can you get than fasting? I don't want anything else. I want you, God. But you know what they're doing in those? And this is the context part. Their good deeds, God is calling their good deeds, what you guys are doing is disgusting to me, because in your festivals, you're doing child sacrifice. In your festivals, you're shedding blood. You think you're getting to me, but you're not. Even your good deeds are filthy rags. Do you see the context? So we take that story, and now we start to identify ourselves with that, because we need to hear the whole story. There's more to the story. There's a chapter 1 before Genesis 2. I want to read just a few verses that actually you smell amazing to God. That actually he's pleased with you. That actually he's just let me read. And I'm just going to start with Jesus, because he is God incarnate, and if he is the perfect reflection of God, we got to listen to his words. And Jesus says, let your good deeds be seen, and it will glorify God. He uses the same phrase. Your good deeds, not filthy rags. Do them. And there's dignity in them, and let them shine, because they're going to bring glory to God. Jesus says, this isn't where he starts. So this is the beginning of him trying to describe who we are. He doesn't start with, you're a sinner messed up. Humanity is just messed up. Jesus starts out with, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand. It gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine. You have light in you. Let your light shine. And he's not talking to a bunch of converted people in a synagogue. He is on a hillside talking to the raw mess of humanity. And he's saying to them, let your light shine. There is light in you. You are the light of the world. You have purpose. You have things inside of you that are good. And this is a fundamentalist miss. We've drawn up a whole doctrinal issue on, nope, there's nothing good in you. There's nothing. The only thing good in you is that Jesus forgives you, and you don't everything in you is. But let's just move. We have to understand that the brokenness in us is a chapter that we move through, but that's not our origin either. And somehow it's so profound to see myself as a broken, messy, dirty person with nothing to offer the world. Even my good deeds are rags. That locks me up in a prison cell. But I got to read chapter 1. Then God said, Genesis chapter 1, let us make mankind in our image. This is the creator. This is the source of love, of light, it just went through creating the seas and the mountains and the stars and the oceans. This being is just it's flowing out of him. And he gets to this is like the climax of the symphony, and he's like, all right, this is all awesome, but now let's make something reflect us, mankind in our image, in our likeness. And then he gives us incredible purpose. He doesn't say we're worthless. He says, so that they may rule over the whole creation. The store owner gave the keys. What more purpose is that? This whole thing we're in, this culture of America, this world culture, God's not making it. We are. This has huge implications to forget chapter 1. We got to remember chapter 1. He says you're going to have dominion over the fish and the birds and the livestock, wild animals, over everything. So God created mankind in his own. In his own. The divinity, and people, because we're afraid of heresy, we can't acknowledge a truth. That there is a divinity, a royalty, a reflection of God Most High straight in our origin and DNA of who we are. In the image of God, he created them. And this is a whole nother sermon. Male and female, he created them. The beauty, the image, the dignity in women and man to reflect something higher than all of this. Is the story. This is chapter 1. So why then, we step into, God gives freedom. He puts a tree. And now, this big thing is moving. God gives us the keys. He gives us freedom by putting a tree in the garden, a real decision. He's not manipulative. He is not controlling us. And now he's walking with us. But humanity started out pretty dark, and a lot of us are really surprised at what's happening right now. And, it's disgusting. It's unbelievable that it's happening right now with how we think of ourselves and stuff. But this has been going on for a long time, people hanging people on the street. Humanity has had a really dark history. And slowly, people rise up with the Spirit of God inside of them. They lay down their lives to count for something. They create something so that whoever's being oppressed is heard. The Bible wasn't written from the top. The Bible is a collection of poetry, art, expression of the slaves, of the oppressed. And look at all the spiritual transformation that's come throughout all of human history because we read the Bible, a text from the oppressed. Did you know that the Bible is one of the only historical documents in all of humanity where it's actually recorded from the perspective of the oppressed? History is usually written from the one who dominates over and over again, but somehow God didn't choose the Egyptians to represent him. God is found in the Israelites who were slaves. And here's the thing is, God is in there. He's in the bottom. And Jesus did this same thing. He lived this same thing. It's not in the top and in the domination. The edification, the transformation. Just to put it in context, what if we listened to the poetry, songs, expression, history of Native American people in this land? Dude, my perspective of this story, the American story, would be, it couldn't stay the same. That's the Bible. If all that transformation from reading the Bible, why, if God is in the lowly, if God came as a lowly carpenter, accused as a thief, offending church and state, killed, if God reveals that he is there, why are we not listening to the bottom? Why aren't we going with passion to the oppressed, to the marginalized, to the unheard? And I'm just going to close with this, but Martin Luther King, he has this amazing quote. Everybody's heard it, and he just says, I just want to read it, even though it's not long and complicated, but I can't see where I put it in my notes, but what he says is, riots are the language of the unheard. And that's what's happening right now. And so us as believers in God, I I just have a massive encouragement to all of us is, what can we do in this? What can we do in this? We listen. We don't need to come in and rescue the day, thinking that we're us on an ego trip. We need to hear their stories, hear their songs, hear their expression, hear the divinity in them. And that's just the whole story. The divinity, the royalty, the dignity is there. It's in the Fijians. It's in the Native Americans. It's in all the minorities. It's in the Hispanics. It's not, all we're listening to is the white people on top. That's how our culture has been directed up till this point. That's why there's riots. That's why. Martin Luther King's quote is genius, because that is the language of the unheard. There's people not being heard and being oppressed. They're not being heard. They're being oppressed. It's coming out through riots. So what if we could have I don't know what it is, the miracle, but to sync ourselves up to the Spirit of God. Instead of getting caught up in the riot, in the expression of the riot, that should just be a signal of now what we're really going to go to is to go listen to and bring back and bring the full story. Because that is the announcement, is African Americans, why don't I call myself a European American? If they're called African, none of us's origin was here, and we all have that story, and now we're all here, and now we're all creating the United States. And I believe in the vision of the United States. I believe liberty and justice for all. And now's a time in history, maybe it can be a step up, a progression of where, we can get after it. And I just want to encourage too, let your voice be heard. Put it in song, put it in poetry. If your pain is kept and, we can't grow and transform. But what if out of this, we just get amazing understanding through art, through music, through concerts, through movies, through news, through articles. I hope somebody reading this or listening to this just gets inspired. Dude, I want to bring light to this situation and this ignorance. And especially as Christians too. And for me, this is a radical move, but to not see myself as a sinner, broken and worthless, to acknowledge that is part of my story. But that was chapter 2. There's a thing before where I'm rooted in royalty and dignity and purpose beyond anything I could even comprehend in this seat. And this is how we're identified. If we're not just going to be stuck in that story, we're identified as, I know this is how Paul refers to it. This is how Paul sees himself. And this is how I think every single human being should see themselves. I know when I come to you, I will come in the full measure of the blessing of Christ. And we all, with unveiled face, beholding the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same thing from one degree to the next, this progression. For this comes from the Lord who is Spirit. Paul says, Romans 8:10, if Christ is in you, though the body is dead because of sin, the Spirit is life. If Christ, the deepest part, your origin. And I just want to read a few of these scriptures just to show that, this is the vision Paul had. Because of the God who said, out of darkness light shall shine, is the one who shined in our heart to illuminate, shined in our hearts. There's good things going on in here. To illuminate the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus Christ. But when it pleased God to reveal his Son in me, this is Paul saying when he went on his mission, how did people see God? In me. I'm not just a piece of crap. You're not a piece of crap. How is God going to reveal himself, a God of love, and compassion, nation of all languages and tongues. How is he going to reveal that? Through you, because of what you reflect. And, Christ in you, the hope of glory, Colossians 1:27. And, I'll just leave us with this challenge is, before we make our action plans and we think we understand the story of even ourselves, what if instead of all these confrontations that we're responding back with, what if we flip that into conversations? Not confrontations, but conversations. Listening. Just watch what will happen. The people who were so drawn to Jesus, the broken people, always felt heard by Jesus. They always were known by Jesus, and they were always loved by Jesus. And so that just kind of sums up where I hope we can be as Creekside in Park City. Before confrontation, I know there's pain coming at you, but look at Jesus in this story. He didn't have to prove anything back. He was on his mission. I know, bros, I know you guys think I should do this. I know you're challenging me, and I know you're calling me out. And he continues on his mission. And I think we just follow that. That's all we do. We imitate our teacher. And we flip these confrontations into conversation, and with this hope, and as we're having conversations, this is what we're doing. We're going to find the light in them and let that come out. We're going to see the light in them, the truth, the image of God in them. And that is a Christ-following person, is to stare in the eyes of any human and see God. That's what Jesus said. And every voice should be heard. And let's just start there as a community. Voicing, but responding with listening. And there is a progression. And I see that happening not just in Mission Fiji, with how we've been on this journey. It's going to happen here. And I am hopeful. In the midst of 2020, in all the madness, I am hopeful because this is our time. This is our time. So thank you guys for joining us, and look forward to connecting. Amen.
I raise a hallelujah in the presence of my enemies. I raise a hallelujah louder than the unbelief. I raise a hallelujah. My weapon is a melody. I raise a hallelujah. Heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Let's sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. Sing a little louder. In the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder. Oh, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder. And heaven comes to fight for me. Come on. Sing a little louder. In the presence of my enemies. Sing a little louder. Oh, louder than the unbelief. Sing a little louder. My weapon is a melody. Sing a little louder. And heaven comes to fight for me. I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, gonna hear my praises roar. From the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive. I raise a hallelujah. 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 I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. Up from the ashes, hope will arise. Death is defeated, the King is alive.
Let's invite God into our presence today. We all need some healing, encouragement, and peace. Holy God of our faith, you are welcome in this place. You are welcome in this place.
Sweet Lord, sustain us. Oh, sweet Lord, sustain us. Oh, sweet Lord, sustain us. Oh, you carry me on the wings of love. You carry me. You carry me on the wings of love. You carry me. You carry me on the wings of love. You carry me. You carry me on the wings of love. Oh, on the wings of love.
Lay it all down.
Bring your worry, grief and pain, and every cause you have to shame. Lay it all down. Lay it all down. When your cares have buried you, and there's nothing left to do. Lay it all down. Lay it all down at the feet of Jesus. the feet